Welcome back, and thanks so much for staying with ANN7 Prime. My name is Cindy Mabi. Good evening to you. The ANC top brass is keeping South Africans guessing on whether or not President Jacob Zuma is leaving office. In the meantime, the rumour mill is on overdrive, and ANN7 reporter Cindy Siwetwala has more.
The African National Congress has set the record straight on President Jacob Zuma's fate. The head of state is not going anywhere, at least for now.
President Jacob Zuma and President Ramaphosa are actually talking about the coordination between Luthuli and government. And that's where the matter is. So the matter is with us. There isn't any rumor or any decision taken to remove Comrade Zuma, as some say in the social media. The deadline has been given, a deadline by tomorrow. There isn't such a thing.
In fact, the ANC top brass is maintaining cordial relations with President Zuma, even inviting him to meetings as per party tradition.
ANC NEC will continuously invite, in fact, Comrade Thabo Mbeki and Comrade Jacob Zuma are ex officio in the NEC because they are former presidents. This is the convention which has been there, and the NEC has taken that decision.
Meanwhile, the fallout over provincial executive committees in KZN and the Free State is being addressed in true ANC fashion.
We have set interim structures, both in the Free State and in KZN. We will be in KZN tomorrow, and Wednesday will be in the Free State to inform them about the NEC decisions so that we move forward. In the Free State, we are rerunning the 14 branches as the court ruled. We have suspended, not dissolved. We have suspended the PEC of the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal because we agreed as the NEC that we don't want to solve and resolve our matters in courts.
The ANC has so far navigated minefields that threaten to implode the movement. The jury is still out on the longevity of the newfound unity. Bureau Report, ANN7.
And on the debate tonight, we ask, is President Jacob Zuma's removal now only a matter of time? And can the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa manage a graceful exit for Zuma? And can the Zuma question still divide the African National Congress? And to debate these and other questions, we're joined by Papano Pasha, a political analyst, Jackie Shandu, political analyst, and Oliver Dixon, social political analyst. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. And just to check how you're doing, and I'm sure your followers on social media were concerned, having survived that car wreck. Are you all right?
I'm fine, thank you, my
friend. Yeah, by God's grace, we're very glad to have you. Let's talk about the imminent removal of Zuma and what the ANC came out with in the media briefing after the Lekgotla, saying that matter has been done and dusted, it's been buried, it's seized, we're not even discussing it anymore. What do you make out of it? I'll start with you, my queen.
Good evening to your viewers at home. I don't really understand why the ANC should in fact be entertaining this discussion. Because in the first instance, the National Conference of the ANC said, and it did not deliberate on this matter. And, my thinking would be that post-conference, the ANC would then be consumed with, galvanizing, closing ranks and preparing for 2019. Because the reality is that, Cindy, the ANC or the NEC itself does not actually have the powers to even recall the state president, because the state president or Jacob Zuma that we are talking about at the moment, he's the president of the country and not necessarily the president of the ANC.
But we've seen this with Thabo Mbeki, though. Why can history not repeat itself?
No, but remember, with Thabo Mbeki, the NEC said, and they requested him, to recuse himself, and he agreed to it. Even when you read his statement, he said that he decided to recuse himself, but he called it a coup at that particular time. So if the NEC were to sit and request the president to step down, it is upon the president to then agree, but he can also refuse, by the way. So for me, I think the ANC should focus all its energies, as I said, on stabilizing the organization, uniting all the different forces, and looking towards 2019. Because the reality is that it's the mainstream media which is pushing this agenda, you know, in fact, to destabilize the ANC, with the hope that come 2018 or so, the ANC will be very much dysfunctional, because if you remove the state president, or that is President Zuma, surely there will be repercussions.
Okay, so more ominous situation could arise if President Jacob Zuma is recalled, in your view, but the demeanor of the NEC essentially just brushing that matter aside. But we heard over the weekend, of course, the rumor mill on Overdrive saying that President Jacob Zuma, based on sources, apparently that is on part of the agenda, that he will be given a graceful or gracious exit, if you will. What do we make out of it? We know the ANC can also mandash at times, so nothing is cast in stone.
Good evening, Cindy, and good evening to the viewers of NN7. Look, the matter is two-pronged. It's both internal and external. Internally, we're talking about also a fairly divided NEC of the ANC. Of course, for purposes of maintaining party image and not putting the party into disrepute, it must put out an image of unity and singing from the same hymn book. But the reality of the matter is that you have a combination of people that come from those opposed slates, from the CR slate, from the NDZ slate. Others singing the New Deal song, others going with RET. But over and above that, inside the ANC, for instance, look at COSATU, look at the SACP position, we look at the stalwarts of the ANC. Those are internal opponents of President Jacob Zuma, who have been very consistent in calling for his recall for quite some time now. So it's not to say it's a situation that is cooked primarily outside the ANC. We are aware for a fact now that in the NEC meeting that took place last week, the matter was brought up. It was not on the agenda item. It was raised on the floor. We also saw immediately after Nasrec, in fact, we were still at Nasrec, Solomon Pile of the SACP coming, that the first thing we as the SACP are going to call for is the recall of President Zuma. The stalwarts have come and said the same. It has been coming from all quarters. The larger question is, what does it represent? Whose interest will it serve? And from where I'm seated, it's not necessarily the interest of the ordinary citizens of this country. It's a coup that has been tried even by opposition parties. It has nothing to do with the ANC, that government that must service the needs of ordinary people.
Yeah, so can we dismiss what had been said before the January 8th statement as something that is null and void? They now will focus on the new hymn sheet, which is the renewal, the unity of the organization is based on the January 8th statement.
The important part here, Cindy, is that the January 8th statement was a cosmetic statement at large. It was about creating an image of a party that's renewing itself, a party that's united. But the mixed message we got on the weekend about the removal or the recall of President Jacob Zuma is not by accident. And here's the factors at play. The ANC wants to, there seems to be an appetite, at least by some within the NEC, Becky being one of those, to get rid of Jacob Zuma, right? But they know that the removal of Jacob Zuma is going to have severe repercussions for the party itself. One of those repercussions is the potential split of a faction away from the ANC, which will damage the ANC's electorate come 2019. One such faction would be the voter bloc in KZN, which is vehemently in support of Jacob Zuma. If you remove Jacob Zuma and if you embarrass him through his removal, you lose, you won't necessarily lose the KZN voters to another party, you just lose them to the party itself, because they'll just not rock up for elections in 2019. That will damage the ANC's electorate then. But the second and the important part is that the ANC needs to become more decisive about this, because if they do not act now, Jacob Zuma will be embarrassed when Parliament opens, because there the opposition only has to raise a motion of no confidence, and when they do so, Jacob Zuma will almost certainly be removed there. Here's why. In the last vote of motion of no confidence, only 80% of the ANC caucus voted for Jacob Zuma. If that number dips to 75% of the ANC caucus, that means more than half of Parliament doesn't have confidence in Jacob Zuma, and that man is gone along with his cabinet. And that's the danger here. So if the ANC doesn't ask him to step down, he will be removed in Parliament, and that's where the real danger lies for the ANC, its image and its ability to win the election in 2019.
Okay, let's just stack the blocks here as to what could potentially happen in the removal or supposed removal of President Jacob Zuma. We know that there's a process in Parliament to review the laws around the impeachment of a president. There has been numerous no confidence votes against him. What does he have to mitigate against, or even duck, if you will, this time around, should he deliver the State of the Nation address and still remain in Parliament?
Look, I want to slightly disagree with Oliver, because what he does is he's saying that this is what will happen during the opening of Parliament, and the president will surely be embarrassed. It has happened before, but then he goes on to say that the president will be removed. I mean, that's not a fact. What we know is that the ANC would not go to Parliament and remove its president knowing what the stakes are. The reality is that the opposition would not want the ANC back in power. Because remember, as you rightly say, when you remove the president, it means that Parliament automatically collapses. Do you think the ANC wants to see that happening? No, it does not. Surely Parliament are over petty, opposition politics, even though there are differences in the ANC. We've seen it happening many times. Even those people who have been saying outside of the public space that the president must go, they've been saying that they will not betray the mandate of the ANC. So I think we must be, we must be objective and not necessarily subjective when it comes to...
But within the party itself, they've called for Zuma. We've seen NEC members before, even the current new ones. I think it's David Masondo, who, together with Peggy Cele, as you were saying, within the new leadership, there is a call...
Sorry, let me finish. Even previously, there were people who have been saying the president must go, but they've been consistently saying that it is the ANC that must decide that. Remember, Parliament is not a playground of the ANC. It's an opposition space. The ANC would not want to hand over power to the opposition. But let me also say this. A few days ago, I said that the chickens are coming home to roost for the president. I expect President Zuma to actually apologize to what happened in relation to the recall of President Thabo Mbeki. Because, honestly, it might be too late, but he must be able to reflect. He must also be able to take accountability. So the ANC, takes this as a learning curve, but Cyril cannot repeat the same mistake that was made by Jacob Zuma.
I don't see President Jacob Zuma finishing his term, to be quite honest. And if you ask me, perhaps it may even augur well for the ANC going into 2019 next year, because of this narrative. It's a very powerful narrative. It may not be accurate, it may not be true, of corruption, association, Gupta, state capture, and so on and so forth. It's there. It is deeply entrenched. Also, it also talks to the hegemony, the hegemonic space enjoyed by corporate white media in information dissemination, which is very selective, which must serve a particular very narrow agenda.
Would that impact on the traditional voter base of the ANC, though? We've seen when Ethos and Nkandla and all of that were very prominent in the urban metropolis, that it didn't necessarily impact that much, albeit that voters abstained, but it wasn't necessarily a dramatic increase for the opposition either.
The 52% plus South Africans who live in actual definitional poverty don't care about the Guptas. Those 52% plus South Africans whose major concern is, am I going to eat tonight? Those people don't care about what middle-class media disseminates to them. Those people care about services, bread and butter issues. And if you come as a president, and this is what President Cyril Ramaphosa's message is going to be, if you come and say, yo, this is our plan for housing, this is our plan for jobs, this is our plan for poverty alleviation, you win the vote of those people. So I don't think the narrative, albeit powerful, is going to impact that voter base, and that's largely the ANC's voter base. They do stand, however, a chance of losing this. But before that, I just want to respond. There's a difference between the Parliamentary Caucus and the NEC. The NEC may be much stronger than the Parliamentary Caucus. The Parliamentary Caucus still has people like Derek Hanekom inside of it. The Parliamentary Caucus still has people who have openly said, I will vote against Jacob Zuma, and they did. 20% of that caucus. If that number grows to 25%, Jacob Zuma's gone.
But do you think it's a very likely outcome. Do you think Derek Hanekom himself will want to see the ANC losing power? I'm saying to you, ANC, ANC leaders who are in parliament, they are not they are not that myopic, to take such decisions which will finally impact on the ANC. And
I think you're being very generous to them. I do think that there are people whose hatred towards Jacob Zuma in the caucus.
I think hate is a strong word. I think hate is but a strong word. But I'm also saying that there are differences, with all these comments within the NEC. But will they trickle down to Parliament? We don't know. But what we also know is that there's also the impeachment case that you spoke about. We know that the legal team of the president is actually contesting that. Cindy, let me tell you what should happen. And I'm glad that the SG of the ANC, has taken some responsibility to say that the ANC must unify. Because even if you saw at East London, the unity that was there amongst the members of the ANC, what they want to see leaders of the ANC reconciling, forging hegemony.
We also saw Zuma being booed, though. It might be, you could say it's a sprinkle of hands here and there, it's a sporadic thing, but there has been that consistent voice that says, he has to go. Do you ignore those voices and preach how, sacrosanct unity is and we must just move along?
Look, let's just look at Escom. This should also be an interesting case study where you've just seen the new board coming in. In fact, prior to that, ANN7 interviewed the new president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, on the State Capture Commission and its terms of reference. And he was clear that which the former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, those terms of reference, that scope, it must go as such, effectively saying it is Guptas that we are after and we are not interested in a broader sort of inquiry. That's how we put it.
At least not yet.
And then he moves. You see what's happening now in Escom. There's a clear purge, and they're saying those who are found to have been doing wrong things. So here's what happens. In public, for obvious reasons, by the way, these are very experienced politicians. They play the game. All political parties play that game, by the way. There are divisions in the EFF, there are divisions in the DA. But for purposes of forging this unity publicly and not, making the party sort of come into disrepute and
your prophecy is that he's going to go.
So what's going to happen? I don't see President Jacob Zuma finishing his term. I think what's probably going to happen is that they are going to meet with him to say, look, let's have as smooth as possible a transition. Let's hear what you have to say. It can't be an embarrassment.
Yeah.
I agree with Oliver because of that KZN factor, which is a huge voting bloc nationally.
And Cyril Ramaphosa did say that they're not in the habit of embarrassing their leaders, and will they start now with President Jacob Zuma?
But why do we give Cyril Ramaphosa so much? Is there this assumption that Cyril Ramaphosa on his own has got so much power? Knowing that the NEC itself, it's highly divided. And, they're talking about unity, but we do know that you also have that strong faction that supported NDZ within the NEC. And one of the things that they would not want is to see the ANC splitting. But let me also say this. I think, I hear what you're saying, but I fail to understand how the Escom factor comes in relation to what is happening within the NEC. Remember, Cyril Ramaphosa is highly conflicted when it comes to SOE. Escom, for example. So it would not be a surprise if, for example, he would appoint a board which is pro, for example, white capital.
Sure.
And I don't think that it has anything to do with the contestations within the ANC. Surely, if you look at the SOEs themselves, they've got their own challenges. They've got, But I think this is more voter confidence or public confidence that he is in, entrenching his authority, if you will, making
Power
changes. Power is,
I don't think so. I don't think power has shifted just because we have the example of Escom and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa was vocal on Escom. Whether or not we were at a different time, he was going to have to be vocal about Eskom anyway, given the portfolio he holds in the presidency, which is directly responsible for SOEs, right? So the time could have been different. He would still have been vocal. His vocalization now is not an indication of the shifting of power. Importantly, however, here, the ANC can prevent the removal or the recall of Zuma if they play the game of public perception well. Here's how they can do it. There's already a perception, albeit a wrong perception, that Cyril Ramaphosa has started being the president of the country, so to speak, given what he's done on Escom, given what's going to happen with SAA also has to release their financial statements, and he's going to have to be vocal in terms of that alongside Minister Lynn Brown on that. Given that Cyril Ramaphosa has so much on his plate, and the fact that he's representing South Africa in Davos at the moment means that there's a perception by the ordinary voter that this man is already performing the duties of a president. Yeah. They just have to maintain that, and Jacob Zuma has to lay low, and they never have to get rid of him.
But just banish him, Twinka, and maybe ceremonial activity.
There's another factor, and I'm hoping that progressive civil society movements will take heed of this. We're talking about the Escom issue, and we have deviated a little bit. But I think it was very unfortunate for the president to then say, Koko, for example, he must go through a disciplinary hearing. But over and above that, the deputy or the president of the ANC is highly conflicted, and for me, it's concerning because, if we put our ears, on the ground, the reality is that some of the state-owned entities might be privatized, and Cyril Ramaphosa might be behind it.
In fact, to agree with you, Pravin Gordhan was stopped in his tracks with a massive privatization process that he was trying to, targeting SAA, targeting Telkom itself, and even Transnet. So, Cyril Ramaphosa is the new Thabo Mbeki Mandela combination. Very strong neoliberal outlook. This default. I mean, they are celebrating the appointment of Jabu Mabuza. We know what happened at Telkom, and there's a very superficial analysis in terms of the working conditions, in terms of the job losses, and so on and so forth. So it does seem that, of course, by the way...
does it spell arity or the death thereof?
Can I speak to that?
Before you go there, sure. I'm just wanting to conclude on that particular thought that Cyril Ramaphosa is again associated with being in bed or too cozy with business.
That was transformation is not going to happen. And that was the burial, and the tombstone was in East London by Cyril Ramaphosa's clearly neoliberal capitalist posture that he took.
So maybe the unveiling will be when he comes home, and then
now he's going to Davos. Now he's going to Davos. Davos has a history. The World Economic Forum has done absolutely even its.
But the South African government, no, that one I have to differ, because the South African government, if you look at the delegation, it has always had that neoliberal posture. Sure. Nothing much has changed. If you look at, and I think that I think the ANC, as I said, the ANC must be very careful of the noises or the narrative from the media, because they're very divisive. The reality is that if you look at the Davos delegation for the past years, even with Mandela, remember Mandela went to, before he went to Davos, he was speaking nationalization. Right. When he came back, he said the ANC has never, ever positioned itself as a socialist organization. Right. So the delegation that goes to Davos has always been business inclined or capitalist, in nature. Right. But I'm hoping that the ANC itself, the ANC is very broad. The ANC is not individuals.
But the majority of ANC members are agents of white monopoly capital.
That's fine. The ANC is not a socialist organization.
Okay, worst case scenario, best case scenario, very briefly.
Privatization. It's unfair to say that Eskom is going to be privatized and Cyril Ramaphosa sitting behind that, because 2 months after Jacob Zuma appointed Malusi Gigaba as a Minister of Finance, Malusi Gigaba walked into Parliament and used the term strategic equity partners when he referred to Eskom. That alone spells partial privatization without Cyril Ramaphosa's influence and involvement.
But he was but in the interest of time. There's a mistake that has always been made. Cyril Ramaphosa is a product of Jacob Zuma ascendancy. You cannot... Cyril Ramaphosa has been in Parliament for the past 5 years. So how do you isolate him from this cabinet which is here? How do you isolate if there's a rod within
Jacob Zuma shifted that cabinet unilaterally.
How do you know it was unilateral?
Because
okay, those are some of the challenges. Some of the challenges that obviously the new NEC and the leadership will have to deal with. Not only organizational renewal, Jackie, but I just want to just very briefly answer me these two questions. Worst case scenario and best case scenario in retaining or letting Zuma go.
The markets, again, it's going to come into play here. Worst case scenario, the people who have access to Cyril Ramaphosa's ear, Maria Ramos, Trevor Manuel, those people whisper the echoes of the markets and say if Jacob Zuma doesn't go, the markets will crash. That, again, will be a lie. But secondly, and importantly here, it's about what do the voters want. So the ANC is going to have to run lots of polls wherever it goes on the ground and determine just really what the feeling about Jacob Zuma is. Because I think we sit here and speculate that most people want Jacob Zuma gone, and when that's not the case.
The ANC has been winning many by-elections. I mean, if, for example, Jacob Zuma or the ANC were at its weakest, I mean, quantitatively
But let's understand how the ANC functions as a party. It's not a party that goes and consults or what must happen in terms of governance and deployment. You have the NEC and the NWC that is given those powers. And there's no consultation process.
They need to now start consulting.
It's not going to happen. Look, the fact of the matter is that RET has been defeated. The ANC's direction now moving forward is clearly neoliberal. But whether you retain President Jacob Zuma or not,
I think we should not also undermine proponents of RET within the NEC. You've got the likes of Esma Khashule, you've got the likes of Nkosazana Zuma, Faith Mutambi, you know, many other comrades, Stumo Dlamini of this world, who have been saying consistently, you know, that RET must be practicalized. But over and above that, Cyril Ramaphosa himself is expected, you know, to implement RET because conference mandated him to do so. Hence, it's important now for ANC ordinary members to now ensure that there's accountability from their leaders and stop sitting back while the media is making all this
30
noises.
seconds. In your view, should Zuma or should the ANC let Zuma go? Yes or no?
At the moment, no. A number of things are going to stop working when Zuma goes. Zuma has a G8 summit to facilitate next year. This year in Durban. Zuma has Operation Bakisa to complete. Zuma has the HIV program to complete, free education to complete, and land expropriation without compensation. Given how the National Working Committee looks like, those things will get completed.
The national election next year supersedes all those things. I think an analysis that must be done by the ANC is it in our best interest to retain President Jacob Zuma for purposes of the national election
to say that President Zuma has only support in KZN is also a fallacy. You know, the president enjoys support across many different provinces. So I think it will be a mistake to remove the president. But over and above, the ANC, again, as I said, the NEC of the ANC cannot remove its president. It does not have the constitutional mandate to do that.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there and take it offline. We're seriously out of time. Papano Pasha joining us in studio, Jackie Shandu and Oliver Dixon, social political analyst and political analyst. Much appreciated. You at home, we can continue the debate on social media. We take a quick break. We'll see you shortly.